It is now 1:04 p.m. and I call this budget hearing into order. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce the members of this committee. We'll start off with my far left. We have Representative Leila Staffler. She is the chairwoman for education. To her right is Representative Selena Babauta, chairwoman for JGO. To her right, Representative Edwin Probst, chairman for gaming. And to his right, Representative Christina Sablan, chairwoman for health and welfare. Moving over to my far right, we have Representative Patrick San Nicolas representing Tinian. To his left, Representative Richard Lizama, representing our chairman for PUTC, and then to his left we have Representative Vicente Camacho, the chairman for Federal and Foreign Affairs, and I am Donald Magnolia, the chair for this Health Ways and Means Committee. With 8 members present, that constitutes a quorum for to conduct today's budget hearing. And assisting the committee, we have our senior legislative assistant, Ms. Claire Sablan, our fiscal analyst, Mr. Robago, our legal counsel, Joe Tyrone, our IT, Jonathan Diaz, and our sergeant at arms, Mr. Pete Tuwai. All right, members, with that, can I get a motion to adopt today's agenda? Motion was placed and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Opening statement of the chair. Good afternoon again, members. Good afternoon, former Speaker DeLeon Guerrero. Welcome back to your house. And now Secretary of Department of Community and Cultural Affairs. Today we are going to discuss the DCCA's budget submission, as well as the governor's proposed general fund allocation, along with the American Rescue Plan Act, which is found on volume 4 of the governor's submission. Members, if you received the analysis from our fiscal analyst, DCCA had submitted a request for about $1.2 million based on the governor's proposal. The governor had proposed $988,000 under the general fund, $3.1 million under the ARPA, and that gives us a total of $4.1 million in total proposed for DCCA. That's an increase of about $2.9 million. And so we are here today to hear from DCCA to see if they have a revised submission that they would like to give, or if there's any additional requests that they'd like to include. And that's for the members to consider. And so with that, I would now like to hand the floor over to you, Secretary, to provide any opening statement.
Good afternoon, Chairman Manglotnya and honorable members of this committee. It's good to be back. I'd like to open up by introducing our team, the DCCA team. And once we get to the Q&A, questions and answers, if you have specific questions related to each program, they can answer. They're here to answer directly. First of all, my name is, of course, you mentioned it, Joe Guerrero. I was appointed in December of this year, December 27th. With me today, let me start on my far left, is Mr. Melvin Faisal, who heads the CCLPC, Chamorro Carolinian Language Policy Commission. Next to my left is our DCCA accountant, and to my right immediately is Mr. Parker Yobe, who heads the Commonwealth Council for Arts and Culture. To his right is Ms. Vivian Sablan, Division of Youth Services, and Mr. Walter Macaronas is with NAP. Now, Mr. Macaronas, I believe, did not submit a budget request. They are 100% federally funded. We ask that he be here in case you guys have questions regarding NAP. So thank you, Mr. Macaronas and all directors for being with us today. Let me apologize. A few of our directors are not here today. Representing CCDF, the Child Care Development Fund, Ms. Maribel Loste, and the Child Care Licensing Program, Mr. Gordon Salas. They're currently hosting a workshop. It's called a peer-to-peer workshop with our resident staff on Tinian and Rhoda. And that's going on. It started yesterday and continues today. So they will not be with us. If you have questions regarding those two programs, I'll be answering on their behalf. And Ms. Rita Chong, who heads the Historic Preservation Office, is currently on Pagan with other regulatory agencies for these. I believe it's the Bureau of Military Affairs that's hosting that survey work. So she's not here. And I just found out Mr. Walter Manglotnya for the Office on Aging is on jury duty today. So I apologize, they're not here today. And Mr. Chairman, I really don't have any prepared speech or presentation. We were advised by OMB to basically submit our budget in accordance with this current year's funding levels, meaning no additional programs. I guess just to summarize, we submitted a request to maintain the current personnel, to maintain the current programs that we're currently doing. We didn't get everything that we submitted, but as you know, as you had just mentioned, there is this ARPA funding that was allocated to each department. And just generally, that came out to 3.1, as you said, I think for this fiscal year and fiscal year 2022. It's broken down to like 800 something thousand. We do have we are preparing and will be submitting to OMB our expenditure plan for those additional funding. That should be ready by tomorrow. We haven't turned it in yet. Yes, that's pretty much our presentation, and we'll be ready to answer questions going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. I don't believe you mentioned the accountant's name. Can we just get her name for the record? And then someone who just walked in.
My apologies, Ms. Matilde Rosario is our accountant 4. I told her to sit right next to me. She's been she was the one who compiled the various submissions for different programs and has been working with OMB. So I may be deferring to her for some questions that she could probably answer. Thank you.
And Rizal, is that?
Sorry, she just came in.
Yeah.
Yes, I did mention Ms. Rizal Billy. I did not mention Ms. Rizal Billy heads our low-income home energy assistance program, LIHEAP, or LEHAP. Yes, and thank you,
All right.
Marcel.
Thank you, Secretary. Good afternoon again, and welcome to your team. Also joining us today is Representative Sheila Valta. She is the Chairwoman for Natural Resources. All right. Thank you for that, Secretary. Before we begin, before I hand over the floor to the members for their questions, I know you mentioned that you will be submitting a revised budget by tomorrow, but can you briefly go over some of the requests that you'll be submitting and how much that will cost? I don't know. Maybe if you don't have the detail, you can. In summary, how much would you need for personnel? What are you asking? If there's any additional FTEs that you are requesting, what does that look like? Is that something that you have with you today?
I'll be turning it over to Ms. Rosario, but before I do that, let me, yeah, let me just state, it's not really a revised budget for really for purposes of the FY 2022. It is a, an expenditure plan to OMB. Now, I don't know if they'll be submitting it in, but we do have it almost finished. But we can talk about. I'll be turning it over to Ms. Rosario to kind of talk about what that plan entails.
Um, Good afternoon, everybody. Okay, the just in summary, the ARPA funds that DCCA is going to be submitting to OMB. On personnel, we have about 1.4 million allocated for personnel with 66 FTEs. We were given like 90 FTEs, but just came up with like 66. And I don't know if we're going to be, at this point, I don't know if we're going to be adding more FTEs to that 66 numbers. Okay, for professional services, we have 200 allocated 209,558. Some of that money is going to go to I think a software that LIHIP is going to be purchasing, and Arts Council came up with some ideas to um, pay some of their canoe workers that are helping out with the canoe. And then we have also communications throughout the division, $20,000 allocated for that. And we have travel. Travel is mostly for Rhoda and Tinian. And then a big chunk of it, like 20,000, is going to be a request from Arts Council, which is about $20,000 for the PIBA conference this year. Repairs and maintenance, we have 57,500. Some of that repairs and maintenance is going to cover costs for repairs to satellite office buildings for DYS. They have like 3 offices that they are looking into, kind of like doing some renovations on. And then we have utilities. We're requesting for 20,000 because there's also some of these monies from the utilities are costs that needs to be paid because there were like divisions, what do they call that? Previous billings. So some of those charges are going to cover that. And then we have cleaning services, 14,000. We have a lot of satellite offices, so some of the divisions can't cover some of their cleaning services in their offices. And then we have an old debt that DYS came up with, 36,000 is going to cover some food and from shelter. And that's from, what is that one from? B for? Oh yeah, emergency shelter. And then we have fuel and lubrication throughout the department, where it came out with 30,500. And then supplies operations, we have 47,000. That covers the cost for Scott Towel cleaning services, things like that, operational stuff. We have also for improvement of buildings, we actually have three divisions that are going to be are looking into renovating new office buildings, which is the government. Like one of them is the Chamorro Carolinian. They were assigned a housing area already that's going to cost 180,000. It's going to fund that, and then LIHIP is looking into also doing some renovations for an office building because they're temporarily housed at the Carolinian Affairs Office. DYS is currently located in the Secretary's office, so they're also looking into finding an office for outside of that Secretary's office for the administration office for DYS. And then we have machinery tools. The canoe project is looking into buying equipment to continue with the canoe projects. We have for the Arts Council, they're looking into paying 100,000 to buy a stage, permanent stage for the arts events that they have, like the arts festival, and so that's a big chunk right there. And then we have the vehicles, 4 vehicles, 88. We're looking at 88,000 vehicles. One pickup truck for the canoe program, one pickup truck for the sports program, and the Office of Secretaries looking into purchasing one, and the Arts Council administrative vehicle. Also, the sports program, we're kind of enhancing that, the sports program. So we added like 3 new FTEs under that program. And they're right now officed at the ADAS gym, and secretary in the sports program is looking into kind of funding and for that program. That's it.
All right, thank you for that, Ms. Rosario.
This is just significant amounts there are other small amounts, but this is a significant amounts for that ARPA plan. Thank you.
So are you trying to justify the additional 2.9 million, or is there a figure that you've come up with in regards to all the
We
requests that you
actually-
just listed?
Oh, I'm sorry. We actually used up the 3.1 million. Program the 3.1 million.
Okay. And so you're trying to fall within that range, or are you needing additional funds on top of that?
No, I think we're good.
And then in regards to the 66 FTEs that you've mentioned earlier, is that in addition to the 74 that you currently have on board?
No, originally we were giving 74, but then when we had a meeting with Vicky, they increased to 90. But no, we're not going to have any more
So what's
than
the
that 66. Yeah.
66 is what you currently have right now?
Yes, currently, yes.
So do you know where the 8 FTEs are? Did those become vacant, or if you were it was proposed at least on the first submission 74, but you said you have 66 right now. Are you needing the additional? Will you be needing the additional 8 FTEs?
On this total of 66 FTEs, we do have some vacancies in there. I don't have the numbers right now for the vacancies, I'm sorry, but we do have some vacant positions that are funded but not filled yet. So we kind of maxed out what we currently need for the DCCA.
Chair?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. OMB had us at 74. They increased it to 90, which is an increase of 16. Out of the 74, I believe there are 66 that are currently filled, but our FTEs, not all of those that were furloughed came back, so it's showing vacant. And there were some that left the program, left the department for other reasons. So yes, sports, for example, And now we want to reconstitute the sports program. We also had the respite program that used to be in operation, but due to budget cuts, that program kind of went by the wayside. It was discontinued. With this ARPA funding, we would be using the FTEs to again try to restart a modified respite program under the Office on Aging. The Office on Aging does have some grant money, but their respite program would be just for care for the elderly. But we've asked them if they can also will add on additional FTEs, and they can also run the respite program under the aging program. So it's trying to bring back at least that service, bring it back on.
All right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. At this time, I would like to open up the floor to the members. I recognize Representative Sablan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Secretary, and welcome to you and your staff. My first question has to do with the respite care program. I did note in your citizen-centric report that the program had been suspended for fiscal year 2020. Was it ever in full operation, though, even before that? And that's the first question. And then the second question was, of the 48 registered caregivers that you noted in the report, how many are caregivers for the elderly, if you're looking to transition that program to the Office on Aging?
Could you repeat the first question, please?
Sure. Yeah, the first question was the
it
respite
ever
care program ever actually operating, even before its suspension?
I am not sure. I do know. Let me share with you what I do know. I do know that they did have staffing. It was Mr. Jack Sablon, who's now over quarantine, that kind of got. There's a history with the respite. I think before it was transferred to DCCA, it was under Azuda Network, no? DD Council. And then I'm not sure what the public law was that kind of transferred those responsibilities to DCCA. They did identify office space. They did equip it. They did have people that was going to be responsible for it. I think it ended up being Miss Linda Torres,
Yeah.
but she's now with the HPO. I am not sure if it ever got off the ground. From what I heard, by the time it was about to be operational, the rug kind of came off under them. I do know that they had established an MOA with our NMC nursing program.
Mhm.
But I think the idea was that they would be giving out vouchers, if I'm not mistaken. And please, directors, correct me if I'm mistaken here. They were going to issue out vouchers to provide temporary relief for caregivers. That is for all qualified applicants.
Okay.
Let me just clarify that the Manamco is getting some grants to establish and have their own respite program, again, only for caregivers of Manamco. What I mentioned earlier, because when we, as we were looking at this additional funding that was coming in, Um, we looked at the cost of restarting this, and the cost right now is prohibitive. This modified approach where a program could be started within Office on Aging would just require basically several staff, I think two for Saipan, one from Tinian, one from Rhoda, and they would be housed at our current aging center.
Mhm.
So it's not a big, we don't have to start from scratch again, and that's where the cost savings would be. But I believe the program that they will administer is slightly different from what was proposed in the earlier respite program. They would be having contracts with vendors. I believe there are two vendors on island. The Marianas visiting nurses and Marianas Health Clinic, I believe, or Health something. And they would be the ones that would be providing the relief for caregivers.
Okay.
It's a slightly different approach, but
And they have another grant that will be supplemented by this additional respite care program. Is that, I'm just trying to understand what's happening to the program in this upcoming fiscal year. So, so DCCA is proposing, I see, is it 3 or 4? 4 FTEs and ARPA money. But how much are you? You're not proposing to restart under the office that had previously been renovated and set up to roll out the early version of the program, right?
No.
So what's going to happen to that investment? Didn't you renovate an office? Didn't DCCA renovate an office for the respite care program?
Excuse me, Congresswoman
Sure.
Sablan, but I can relate kind of to the program because Secretary was not actually in the picture when this program kind of started out. But the 4 FTEs is a request from the actually Jack Sablan right now, who's detailed, covers his salary on that, and he's detailed over to the quarantine. But the other 3 is the request for the director Mangloya to new request to run the program
Under
at
aging. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's in addition to the 9 FTEs at aging right now.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rep,
Yeah.
you kind of asked whether aging office will have grant money to administer the aging respite program. That would be separate from what I've asked them to take on.
Okay.
So there will be clear funding and budgeting. Be one would be for the aging program. In addition to that, I've asked Mr. Manglotnya to administer the CNMI respite program, which would be funded through this ARPA additional funding. So there would
Okay.
be separate.
And there's no other grant funding for the CNMI respite program?
At this time, no.
Okay.
I do understand that they could avail, and I don't know if they've reached that level where they were able to get, I believe it's like 50,000 grants, but I'm not sure. I wasn't here that time. But once we get it up and running, if we could qualify for grant monies, we will apply for it. The reason why I've asked Walter to take on this additional responsibility is not only because they're implementing a similar program, but also because Mr. Manglotnya is qualified to provide and to train people. So again, there'll be cost savings because he would be able to train our staff on these kind of matters.
Okay. But under his office, this would only be caregiving respite services for caregivers of elderly family members. Is that correct?
And also, we will have staff there. They may,
Okay.
I told you, we have,
I know there's the aging respite and then there's a CNMI respite, right?
right, but
Okay.
so this
Okay.
is as of last week, really. We
Oh.
sat down and I asked him if we can continue the CNMI respite program, but kind of under the umbrella of the Office on Aging,
Okay.
aside from the aging respite program that he will be administering as well.
Okay. Maybe we can continue this conversation.
Sure.
Offline and after this budget hearing.
Okay.
But because my time is limited. But my next question is also related to the Office on Aging, and I just wanted to ask if, because this has been raised to my attention before, for your meal services for our Manamco, do you have a dietitian that provides any kind of professional guidance for the meals that are prepared? Because I understand we do have constituents that are on dialysis or diabetic, and they have special dietary needs. Is that something that's covered in this budget? And could you just address that?
Oh, I really wish Walter was here so he can give you perhaps more accurate information. I am aware that, before we used to have meals that were prepared by the center, by the Office on Aging. Now that has been outsourced on Saipan, and I believe Tinian, and I think that maybe the direction will be going with Rhoda. And it's because of that concern, Congresswoman, it is because of the concern that we, even the grantor agency, are concerned that the food that is served to them does follow dietary guidelines for the Manamco. And I'm pretty sure that those vendors that are providing the food for Manamcos, for the homebound, are following, I believe, our CNMI. I'm not sure who he or she is, but maybe before I talk too much, we should defer that, and I'll have Walter respond directly.
Okay,
I am aware
yeah.
that is an issue that the feds are concerned with, that Walter's concerned with.
And
I believe that's
local
direction.
dietitians are also concerned about that.
I'm sorry?
Local dietitians are also concerned about that because they're also hearing from the Manamco that are receiving these meals. And so I wanted to bring that to your attention too. Perhaps something that if there's nothing in the budget request that does include the services of a dietitian to just make sure that these meals are following guidelines, especially for the ones that have special needs, then perhaps you could include that in your revised submission.
I believe the grant that Aging receives for the food for the Manamco requires that. Now, let Walter answer you directly.
Okay, thank you. Fair enough, and I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Sablon. I now recognize Representative Lizama.
Thank you, Chairman, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Just want to mention my constituent there, Mr. Melvin Faisal, Precinct 5. He was also was once in the House. So welcome to your home, sir. The other one is now good question, good points. What Rep. Tina, you have 8 hasn't been filled up, correct? Because you have 66 right now on hand, people on board, and you have 8 that have not been. You mentioned about some of them didn't want to come back, no return. What area is that? Where did they affect the operation of that department or agencies? If you don't have those people, and did you already start the announcement to get those people be replaced? Yeah, I think it's referring to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Actually, some of these FTEs, from under the local, were transferred to federal programs. For example, Office on Aging had 16 FTEs at one time. And then when the austerity kicked in, Walter didn't want to furlough his employees. So he transferred all but one FTE to federal program. And I believe DYS also were in the same situation. They didn't want to furlough, she didn't want to furlough employees. So she transferred some of them to federal. So that action right there kind of affected the local monies. So some of the FTEs are transferred to federal programs. Yeah,
I understand, but now that it transfers to the federal side
right.
and you're vacant that local side, have you start any of the announcement to hire
If you're gonna,
so they can fill up the slot?
right, okay.
That's my question.
Right.
I can speak on behalf of DYS. So on the 8th, we do have 3. It's actually coming on board within a few days. Documents are wrapping up. And then the 3rd, our interview is being scheduled at the end of this week. So all the 3 would be taken care of out of the 8.
Thank you. And, I was just worrying about your operation, how would that affect your operation? And I'm glad that you are working toward getting more people to fill up those positions. Heel back, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Lizama. Sorry, members, before I move on, Ms. Sablan, my question is in regards to youth services. In the under the general fund proposal, there's only 5 caseworkers listed. Yes, how many do you have that are federally funded?
On the caseworkers, I do have 9. So
9.
4 are federally funded, and then I have 1 intervention specialist federally funded. So that's 50-50.
And based on the caseloads, is this sufficient to address?
So for FY 2020, we had about 270 cases of child abuse and neglect. It seems like it's sufficient. We're having the support that they need in terms of the number of folks for the Child Protective Services. That's been the highest that we've ever gone, at 10 staff for the Child Protective Services. That's for Saipan, and then we have 2 Rhoda and 2 for Tinian.
All right. Thank you. So clarified. I recognize Rep. Selena Bavalta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome to everybody, Secretary and your team. I noticed in your budget submission, there's no allocation for overtime. Does the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs incur overtime expenses? Any division?
So for DYS, for the longest time, we never incurred. We try to find ways to flex when we could. Now, when we were in the austerity measure period, of course, we were not incurring overtime. So we wanted to make sure now that we do have the funding, because it was either we pay the federally funded employees the OT and not the locally funded employees. So we wanted to make sure, just like WGI and Merit, we want to make sure that it's across the board. And that's how we kind of handled the OTs. There was a point when we had enough money to cover OT when we had the staff incur the OT. But about 2 or 3 budget submissions ago, we were also fighting for pay differential for our staff that were on call, because we do run a 24/7 operation. And that's in the plan to kind of see how we can work to get that included for those that are on call.
Thank you. Are there any other divisions of DCCA that incur overtime? Mr. Faisal.
Thank you, Honorable Congresswoman. Honorable Chairman, in the Chamorro Caribbean language policy, when we employees do accrue overtime, we convert that to in-house comp time because we don't have a allocation for overtime. And that's a flex hours that we worked out with the employee.
Thank you. How or why would help me understand how or why would the Chamorro Carolinian language policy incur overtime?
It's because of the regular board meeting that we have, and knowing that the board members are all educators, it's only on Saturday that we conduct the board meetings. And that's just like a 2 hours, 3 hours accrued overtime, and we convert that to a in-house comp time. Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you. Ms. Vivian Sablan, you are to be commended for being creative in not incurring additional costs to the government. But we do see your agency as one of the most critical needs that need to be funded for OT because of the nature of your work that you and the services that you provide. My next question is, are there any employees of DCCA that are funded through CARES funding at this time?
None for DYS.
None?
None.
Aging does. I think Office on Aging does. I think 3 or to 5. I'm not sure, but I know they do.
Okay, are you planning to transition those employees back to, like, into the general accounts? Because CARES funding is not a bottomless pit. It will come to an end at some point. Are there any plans for DCCA to absorb those FTEs into the general fund? And is it included in the 90 or the 74 FTEs that is being proposed?
I don't know what, at this point, I don't know if Walter's going to do that, but we can go back and tell him that he can do that. So,
I'm not, don't quote me that he can do that. I don't know
Oh.
how much money you guys are gonna get. But one last question, are there any MOUs with the mayors of Tinian and Rhoda in any of the DCCA divisions? MOUs are actually FTEs from the mayors, respective municipal mayors, and they sign a memorandum of understanding with a department or a division to transfer temporarily, laterally use that employee within the department. Are there any MOUs with the municipality of Rhoda or Tinian within DCCA?
For
Yes, Mr.
DYS,
Macaronis.
Walter Macronis, if I have to introduce myself. So we do have an established MOU with the municipality of Rhoda. And this, in a sense, is a partnership acquiring the services of 2 personnel under the mayor's office. They have to be merit personnel. They're providing services, NAP services, pretty much on a daily basis. And we would be cost allocating the amount of work they perform for the NAP. So that's the MOU we have. For Tinian, it is currently pending. We're just waiting for the MOU to be submitted to the DCCA so we could formalize it. It is the same token as how we're working with the municipality of Rhoda.
Are these MOUs the 2 personnel for Rhoda? And did you mention how many from Tinian?
Two for Tinian as well.
Are they going to be physically in Saipan or in Rhoda or their respective?
The respective islands.
Okay, thank you. That's all. I yield my time, Mr. Chairman.
For DYS, I wanted to add, we have two for Rhoda. Yes, two that are currently assigned to the Sinapalo Youth Center.
For
Thank-
Laihip, we have one from both islands, both municipalities.
Thank you, Brett Babata. Sorry, going back to Mr. Macronas, can you again, sorry, just clarify the FTE for Tinian? Because I think, if I recall, during our budget hearing on Tinian, the NAP program only had one personnel, or at least in the current fiscal year.
So they're not FTEs under NAP. They're FTEs under the municipality, and there are two employees. If I have to name them, Donna Ogo and Vivian Magnolia.
That's Rhoda. I'm asking about Tinian.
Oh,
Sorry.
Tinian, I'm so sorry. It is Arseni Borja and Lucia Borja.
Sorry, you said they're both funded through the municipality?
They are funded through the municipality, and we reimburse that based on cost allocation.
Thank you.
Well, but again, I need to clarify that that MOU is not final. It's still being formalized.
Thank you. I recognize Rep. Staffler.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, everyone from DCCA. You are my favorite department, although you are so big. There's so many moving parts, but you have very, very, very important parts in so many different areas. I was very interested to hear about building rentals. I noticed in the budget there's no line for rentals. I know that HPO just moved. Do you currently rent any offices any other else with all of the different parts of your community?
We have gone in the direction of trying to find permanent facilities, getting these government buildings here renovated. I believe childcare licensing program will be moving into one shortly once the CUC is connected. But I don't think we do right now. DYS used to be housed in the Joten Chalampio, but you want to?
So at the end of our 3-year contract with MMC, it happened that we were having the furlough issue. So in order for us to save our staff, we kind of gave that up and sacrificed and moved up to the secretary's office. We secured 2 of our units, one also in Capitol Hill for the juvenile probation unit. Congresswoman Sablan, your question regarding the respite office, we didn't go to waste. We actually secured our child protective services unit in there. And that's where we also conduct our forensic interviews. So it's really being maximized right now. And then our plan for admin, right now we are luckily housed with the DCCA main office. We do plan to secure a permanent setting so that we don't have to go out there and rent long term.
Thank you for the update. I'm glad I know where your office is now. I would have gone to the wrong building. I went to the wrong building for HPO. I wondered about training as well. I noticed that only in the DYS budget, there was a $3,000 for training, but it wasn't approved, I think. There's a parentheses there, but I didn't see training anywhere else. And I know that there's so many different needs of training. So is that something you're going to reconsider for your next submission? Anybody?
Anybody?
Under the Arts Council, we have training, but it's with the annual partnership grant that we get from NEA. So that's why I didn't put anything there.
That's the same with the LIHEAP. So I did not submit it in the local, but under the grants, that's where we put the budget.
Noted.
Likewise for DYS, because most of our staff that were temporarily transferred to federal during the furlough are now moving back to local. So the training, a lot of it is going to be covered by federal money.
I did notice the vast amount of federal fundings that you have maximized on all of the different departments to, supplement all the things that you're doing. So I applaud you in all of your efforts for that. I was a little concerned when I had heard about that there's still not an archaeologist with HPO. Is that something that you guys are working on, I'm sure? Any update? Especially you guys are in Pagan already.
Congresswoman, that is a very high priority. I was in consultation with our grantor for the HPO, the National Park Service, just last week. My last discussion was about the state plan, and that was Friday. I believe that was also the day that director left to her trip. So we will be going back to the table, kind of prioritizing the needs of the programs, especially now that I've been able to get, the Park Service's perspective on where our program stands right now. So yes, upon arrival, probably the next day I'll be sitting down. We do need not only a staff historian, staff archaeologist, we need a staff historian. We may need a grants manager and a consultant to help us develop some of the plans that are required by the Park Service. There is this grant that was made available because of Typhoon U2, but we need to develop a disaster preparedness and response plan. So we may be getting other consultants or outside help to develop some of those plans. So we will need to beef it up. There's so much going on right now also with regards to CDBGDR, the military, ARPA money, infrastructural work. So yes, we may need to get several archaeologists. Let me just also say though that I believe the newly developed office, the IRP, Infrastructure and Recovery Program, that I believe is under the governor's office, is also recruiting experts, architects, engineers, Section 106 consultants, and archaeologists. So on both sides, we want to, beef up our capabilities. But yes, to answer your question, yeah, we really need to.
Thank you for making that a priority. And I hope if there's anyone listening to this budget hearing online, you'll reply. I guess I have one last question, Chairman. Or maybe it's sorry, I'm going to do it. I just couldn't help but read the Budget and Planning Act and notice that there's a requirement for all government agencies to purchase Indigenous works of art. All departments, agencies, boards, councils, commissions, and quasi-public corporations shall allocate as non-reprogrammable, non-deductible item out of monies appropriated each year the amount of no less than 5% of the total appropriation of each respective office in the object class code of office furniture and fixtures to be expended in the acquisition of Indigenous artworks for public display in each respective office and government building. So I highly encourage you to get your artists to come out and start selling their art, because none of us have been following that provision for all these years. So get your budget ready. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Staffler. The floor is now open for the first round. I recognize Representative Sheila Vivalta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Secretary DeLangro and your team. Thank you very much for being here today. I too am a very big fan of the Department of Community and Cultural Affairs. I am so appreciative and grateful of all the programs and events and just different ways you help our community respond to our needs and really try to showcase our culture to our community here and then all over the world. I also want to recognize Ms. Vivian Sablan and her team with our partnership for the Tanapa Youth Center. It was just such a huge success, and I'm so happy to see that renovations are happening right now at the Tanapa Youth Center. The kids message me on Facebook all the time. So we're very excited for that to reopen. So I just have some questions about your budget. My first one being that the Office of the Secretary has a very high budget, and it's almost 3 times higher than any other budget in all of the divisions under DCCA at 1.9 million, and about 1.5 million is allocated under all others. Can you just please explain what you plan to utilize that funding for, just given the fact that, sports and recreation has a total budget of 45,000. We have childcare development fund at 36,000. And I am aware that there are federal funds and grants also supplementing our budgets. But to really have a lump sum of 1.5 million under an all others line item just really screams questions. And so if you can just help expand on that, please.
Okay, I can answer that one. Anyways, those monies right now, the total amount there that you have is the local appropriated and the ARPA. Those monies were kind of lump summed into the secretary's office because we were asked by OMB to come up with a plan on how to use that money. So what we did with that is we went out to all the different divisions and asked them for kind of like their needs. And actually that amount has drastically dropped because
I
we
see.
shared it with we increased the sports program, funding for the sports program, LIHIP, CCO, the small programs that we have in the division. I mean, in the
so I'm
department,
sorry,
we
I don't
kind
mean
of
to interrupt you, but so just in the interest of time, are you saying that your revised budget will reflect that?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right.
Okay, well then we will wait to see the revised budget
All right.
come July 1st. Thank you for that. My next question is in regards to the Division of Youth Services. I have been informed by a number of just participants in the foster care program about payments to the families, the foster families. What line item does that fall under? Is that being funded by a grant?
So the payment to the foster care families is it's 100% federally funded.
And do you have any outstanding payments at this time?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Do you have any outstanding vendor payments at this time? I'm sorry, this is for the secretary or the accountant, just for DCCA. Any vendors, outstanding vendor payments? I think this is the time that all of our vendors are just excited to get paid because we have ARPA funding. So
we went across the department and we did request from all the divisions to provide us that. And I think Park Arts Council came up with one vendor, which was like the security. Was that one of them? Yeah.
Yeah, it was the security for the Flame Arts Festival.
Right.
And right before everything, the alignment slowed down before the COVID happened, and then we just never took care of it. So I put that in and ask if we can pay our vendor. Thank you.
That one and DYS had one, and then our utilities was kind of behind with the aging office. We did the reconciliation with the CUC on that one. We paid that, and I think DYS very minimal. That's about it. No, I think DYS is that 30 something thousand. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just clarify a little bit about the foster care?
sure.
So the way it works is when we have an applicant, foster care applicant, we wait until all the documents are secured. Usually we have a trial placement for 2 weeks before we can sign off on something. What usually delays it is the health clearance. So we won't process anything. So what's supposed to be happening is if those documents are not packaged, So then the foster home is not approved. Then we have to kind of pick up from the trial and move the kid back to the shelter. That's the only thing that would delay. Otherwise, we process payment every month.
I see. I see. Well, if you have any recommendations on how we can improve any processes at the policy level, please just know that our offices are really always open. I know that in the beginning I did meet with secretary and we tried to amend my natural resources committee to reflect the natural and cultural resources committee. That did not happen, but we tried. But we tried. So and so my committee will always entertain any of the community and cultural aspect of policy. So so thank you for that clarification, and really thank you for taking care of our kids at risk. I have personal experience being part of this process of that the foster care system, and it's really not easy, and if we really want our community to come forward and help with being foster parents or a foster home, we have to also think of ways to make it easier for the homes, where we can assist them upfront and not have them incur the cost to be reimbursed later, because we're already struggling. So so just know that my doors are always open. Thank you very much. My next question is in regards to data. What kind of data is collected? What kind of data is prioritized? When it comes to our communities, like income levels, we have abuse and neglect, and we have community events that happen, local artists, talent, education of our culture and our practices. Can you just share with how data is collected and shared with our community? I think this is a very important part of coming from the CNMI, being an indigenous population, having indigenous practices that really support sustainability. We can really find the foundational policies and from the practices of indigenous people around the world. And that's one thing that was really highlighted during COVID, is that if we turn to our indigenous populations, our indigenous communities, we can see how they have really survived for thousands of years because of their sustainable practices. And so I'm interested to know about your data and how that's being collected, distributed, shared, and how it's being prioritized.
I can go first. We have for the Arts Council side, it is required by the grantors to provide data annually. How many adults are involved in a project? How many kids were there? How many total community members were involved? Volunteers, so forth. So we do collect data, and we're updating our website now. And all these data will be available in our website, which is cnmiartscouncil.org. Please visit us if you have time. But yeah, this data will be there, including the amount of money that is spent, how much grant money are we spending annually. The report, the whole annual report will be on our website. And if you guys want a hard copy, I'll be glad to provide you guys that copy. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that annual data
Yeah.
collection?
It is.
Okay.
If I may,
Yes, please.
under the LIHEAP program, if you see in the budget, I did submit, I asked the secretary if he can consider, I wanted to see if we can purchase a data management system. The way I collect data now is just, to submit to our grantors, but I do have, if I can go back and email you probably if you want. Okay, so the data that I collect are, the consumers or the clients that I serve under the low-income home energy assistance program. And these are indigenous people and citizens of the US citizens. So I really wanted to establish that data system so that we can measure the outcome and, help our indigenous people move out of poverty or, not being dependent on the system. So Right now, I'm doing it from scratch, just, per application process. That's where I work off from.
And how many families right now?
Currently, LIHEAP is serving up to 630 some people served
Wow.
of 300 some household.
Wow. And you collect that data and keep that data
It's just an Excel form, yeah.
Excel format. Okay. Maybe Mr. Secretary, can expand on how much this data management system might cost? Or did you?
It will cost me it will cost the CNMI about 120,000. So I'm only asking half from the local side so that I can help out from the federal can also.
Congresswoman, before you came in, I think Ms. Rosario kind of talked about this, our expenditure plan for the ARPA funding coming into the program. And as she said, we've been collecting or discussing how best to utilize those funds. Part of those funds that you will see in the plan, I believe we're going to set aside, 50,000 from the ARPA funds to be dedicated or to be used for the data management software.
Okay, thank you.
In general, though, when you talk about it,
Uh-huh.
just about every program, especially those that do receive federal grants, do collect data. It's just part of the process. But they can answer specific questions if you have. In addition to that, we've also our DCCA website. We're now trying to beef it up, be more transparent by uploading the various programs within the department, even though each program may have their own websites. We do want to showcase what the department is doing, the various programs and data, like you said, our priorities. But we're just now kind of beginning that since I came in. That is a priority. So
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that, many of us who have experience with grants also are aware that what information that we must report to the grantors is really basic, right? And then for our benefit, like collecting data, and I'm glad that you do and you keep it on hand. There's just a range, right? Variety of data that we can collect, that we can use, and that we can also provide to policymakers that can help us form and draft legislation. So I'm glad to hear that it is a priority. Okay, great. And my last question is in regards to, I know that Ms. Rita Chong is not here, but it is in regards to the Historic Preservation Office. And I'm glad that, that she is making trips off island to the Northern Islands too, just to assist or be the voice of the Historic Preservation Office during that visit. Our historic sites are under major threat every day, from big things like climate change, militarization. We have just human impact, right? So my question is there enforcement of any kind when it comes to our historic sites? Or even, like Rep. Leila brought up the fact that 5% of all department budgets must be allocated towards local art in the department. Is there any kind of enforcement around these policies? I know that when permits are applied for, they can be denied, but they can also be approved and very contentious and very, it it can be very controversial, right? The different sites that are applied for development, and We all experienced that boom in development that happened different places where hotels wanted to come up or casinos. And really, historic preservation office is like a line of defense, right? For protecting our lands, very, very limited lands, and also protecting these very historic sites that are so meaningful to our indigenous brothers and sisters. Um, so what kind of enforcement is on your team or is needed that you'd like to share with us?
Thank you, Congresswoman. Within the department, the HPO is a regulatory agency working with, in conjunction with BECQ to issue permits. The HPO themselves do not issue permits. What they issue are clearances, which would be incorporated in the earth moving permit or CRM's major siting permit. I think the biggest challenge we have right now is the professional requirement to have an archaeologist, to have, in the best of worlds, we could get a terrestrial archaeologist, we would get a marine archaeologist, if we had the funding to do all that. But at a minimum, and per the Park Service requirements, we need to have that and a historian. That's our biggest challenge right now. Of course, even before I got in, there've been a lot of projects that were submitted to the HPO, and they've been overwhelmed, no question. They're trying their best. I do understand, though, that there is a new system that is currently being put in place that would give an applicant real-time information about where their permit stands, whether it's being held up by Fish and Wildlife. So I forgot the name of this one-stop process software that they're going to be implementing. But yeah, it would be intended to promote efficiency. I think rather than paper permits, you would be able to check online. So transparency would be there. Real time, you'd be able to check where it stands in real time. That's still in the works. And I believe all the agencies are kind of, I don't know if there's a consultant that's going to be putting the different processes together and be able to implement that. I don't know where it stands right now, but I have been briefed that is kind of the direction that they are going. When I said earlier, I mentioned that the HPO would be getting an archaeologist.
Yeah.
I also mentioned that our government would also be getting the technical expertise that would assist with all the various infrastructure that's going on right now. That would greatly help relieve some of the burden. Those archaeologists working under IRP would not be responsible for the work of the staff archaeologists at the HPO, but at least they'd be able to. There would be experts there that can talk archaeology, that can understand the HPO's requirements. Unfortunately, in the past, there's been a lack of that. In reality, these Section 106, I don't know if you ever heard the term. They had a workshop out here. Those are not state responsibilities. Those are federal responsibilities. The problem is these federal agencies tend to pass on those responsibilities to the state, kind of as a condition of the grant or the money. And so at least now we're beefing up. CNMI government will be beefing up its cadre of technical personnel so that we would be able to, these processes can flow more smoothly, more efficiently, and at least there'll be knowledgeable people there about these different federal requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Babauta. Closing out the first round, we have Rep. Camacho.
Thank you, Chair, and welcome everybody. I guess my question is gonna be to the Office of Aging. On your proposal here or your request, I see 47,592. That's local, right? We're looking at. That's to cover personnel, operation, and utilities, correct? And then when you go back to where you say federal programs awards, I'm looking at 1.8 for let me see, for the aging, and 9.4 million for NAP. Is that correct? I just totaled out the numbers right here. So these are all federal grants. Okay. Well, my question really is, how are the services coming along? In particular, home delivered meals. I just wanted to kind of bring that up, but I would like, is Mr. Macarena here? Tell you. He's not, right? Oh, yeah, that's you.
Yeah, that's me, but I run the nutrition assistance program.
Okay.
Walter Manglonia runs the aging.
Walter. Okay. So what I like to do, I'd rather just not ask the questions because I'm going to ask questions about services and all that. So yeah, I'm going to come and visit you and we'll set up a time to speak of that and maybe bring you here and we'll kind of talk about that. Just for fun.
Is it for the aging office or for
Yes,
the NAP
aging
office?
and NAP. Aging and
Okay,
NAP.
yeah. Well, if you have questions for NAP, I'm here.
But I'd rather not right now, but I was just looking at these numbers and I know they're all program. So we'll leave it at that. I'd like to see you, bring you here and have these guys come with us. And it'd be a wonderful time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Camacho. Before we move on to the second round, if there are any other members that would like to bring up anything else, I'd like to go back to DYS. Now, I understand a while back there was funding under CBDG, not the DR, I think, that was allocated for the Rhoda Youth Center.
CDBG,
Yeah.
regular.
What's the status on that one?
Okay, so in 2018, we did apply and we got funded 200,000. Unfortunately, when we went through the process and the bid went out, the proposals were coming back way more than the 200,000. So what happened just recently, actually, they had to reprogram the money because we were awarded the 200,000. We even paid for DPW to go and assess the center using DYS's funds. However, when the proposal or the bidding took place, the money just was way over the budget. So the plan is, I've already inquired with NMHC. We're going to resubmit a new proposal and make sure that this time around, that the money that's being requested for is gonna meet the needs of the center, the cost.
All right, thank you for clarifying. My next question is for maybe you, Mr. Parker, or Secretary. Reb Leila brought up the provision or the statute one. Are you familiar with the 1 CMC 7203C? That's the one that Rep. Staffler brought up earlier regarding furnitures, reserving 5% of budgeted amounts for furniture to purchase indigenous works of art. Are you familiar with that statute?
It's new to me today, and it's great to hear. So I hope I get a announce it more often, and I would like to maybe get a copy of that bill. And I believe there's also another bill for the artists, which is the tax break that's riding on the agricultural bill. It was passed a couple years ago, but I need to do my homework on the bills regarding arts and artists. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, that's something to look at because it mentions so this is 1 CMC 7203 C. Because it mentions any unused allocation. In the event that the amount allocated for the purchase of indigenous works of art is not used for such purpose, the subsequent annual budget of that office shall be decreased by that amount equal to the unused portion of the amount allocated under 1 CMC subsection 7203. And so, yeah, with that, with Rep Staffler bringing that up, and now that you are more aware of it, I think DCCA should, advertise this more and try to get our artists and our people to avail of selling their works of arts to the departments in order to meet this statute.
Just a quick question. Is that mandatory to purchase, or can it be changed? If they don't purchase the art, then can the money be transferred to our account so we can use the money to
This is
support the
for
artists?
this is
Just
for
a
all
question.
agencies, office furnitures that they've been appropriated. Uh, that's something that you can
It's not for furniture, it's when you're
under
budgeting
budgeted
it's
furniture.
under furniture.
Yes.
So it's just called furniture, but it's actually whatever art. So it could be sculpture, it could be painting, it could be anything.
Right.
Weaving.
It's just I'm a little curious because the language of it is not really clear. Like how do you describe the traditional art? Which one is it? How?
That's a good question. It might
Yeah.
be defined in the
It's
Yeah.
okay.
That's something that we can look more into.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the second round, I recognize Rep. Selena Babalta.
To answer your question, Mr. Yobe, 1 CMC subsection 7203 4, unused allocation. In the event that the amount allocated for the purchase of indigenous works of art is not used for such purpose, the subsequent annual budget of that office shall be decreased by an amount equal to the unused portion. So if you were allotted 1,000 and you didn't use 1,000, they will deduct it by 1,000. So no, it zeroes out in the next fiscal
Okay,
year.
I thought it
But
can
if
be
it-
transferred to our account.
Sorry.
Thank you.
See where it should go.
Thank you, Rep. Babalta. For the second round, any other member? We'll go Rep. Sablan and then Rep. Lizama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this question is for Ms. Sablan, DYS. And thank you, Rep. Babata, for bringing up the question regarding the foster care sponsorship program. So as you know, House Bill 2215, which proposes to extend and expand the foster care program, is still under review in committee. And we did get your comments in support of the bill, but what I wanted to ask was if this upcoming fiscal year budget takes into account including the FTEs, if that takes into account the proposed expansion and extension of the program, or would that be entirely covered by your grant funding?
Right now, it's entirely covered. About 2 years ago, or maybe 3 fiscal years ago, we were covered 90,000 out of local, and then boom, when things kind of went down, we lost the 90,000. So that's why we were kind of also working towards that with Senator Igsomar at the time. But right now, it's totally covered by federal.
Okay.
So
Is there a matching requirement for that? If you were to, if this bill were to be enacted, is there some kind of matching under your grant?
No,
Or
there's no
this-
matching.
Okay.
So it's kind of like a support for the foster care program.
Okay.
And for everybody's info, the foster care is embedded into the Child Protective Services.
Right. Okay. Thank you. And then my next question is for Ms. Rosario with your Light Heat program. Oh, I'm sorry. Or is Ms. sorry, my apologies. Regarding the LIHEAP program, are you engaged with the Office of Grants Management in the rollout of that other emergency rental and utility assistance program? I know there have been some glitches and some bumps. It's been kind of a slow implementation, and there's been some frustration. And so I mean, your office has years of experience administering a similar program. Are you helping that office at all?
If I may, Mr. Secretary. In fact, yes.
Okay.
The secretary called me and Vivian to be part of that referral process, just so that, we can get them clients and also those that are under our program directed in that to that program so that they can assist with their rentals.
Okay.
So
And so that
Vivian
was
can also answer some
okay.
because she had conducted some outreach
Oh, good.
on her site.
And this is recently then, I assume?
Yes.
Okay. Like in the last month that you've been engaged?
Yes,
Okay.
last month.
And DYS as well?
Yeah, so we also have a rental assistance program from one of our funding source, but Rosel and I managed to kind of get maybe close to 50 families over to the Catman Community Center. Today we have packaged, I believe, 13 applications and literally brought it down. So we're kind of helping the families in the process.
Okay. That's great to hear. Thank you. And hopefully, I know they're on a deadline, so hopefully all of that funding can be expended.
Yes,
within-
in addition to the 13, I referred about 40 some of the renters that are currently served under the LIHEAP program. So,
Okay,
yes.
that's great. Thank you. And then my next question is for Mr. Macaranas regarding the NAP program. If you could just provide us with some updates. I know there's been lots of exciting things happening with NAP, but where are we in terms of our transition to the full SNAP, pandemic EBT? And one question that seems to be coming up again and again is there any prospect for disaster food stamps that would be available to people regardless of status, regardless of whether they have children, but they still need food assistance? Could you address that? Thank you.
So the first question was a transition to SNAP. We are in discussion with our federal grantor, and there's alternatives. And right now, the U.S. president has included in his budget proposal a increased annual block grant for the CNMI up to $30 million. So the alternative is whether to enhance the NAP program or to transition to the SNAP. And at this point, that's under discussion. I have no confirmed information as to the direction at this point.
When do you have to make a decision? Or when does the CNMI have to make a decision?
Well, the information has been presented to the governor, and the governor will be responding to FNS's options. So the transition at this point, I don't have the information to share. That there's no deadline, I believe, but the response is needed sooner than later. Does that answer your question with regards to the transition?
Yes, it does. But maybe you could have more updates when Representative Camacho's committee calls you.
Perhaps, yes.
Yeah, okay.
If you want to schedule that in the
Yeah.
next couple of weeks. I'll be not available in August, though, just to let you know. I'll be on personal leave. But with regards to PEBT, we had a deadline of applications on June 11. There was a dozen of families that missed the deadline, so they appealed to the Board of Education, and we were able to get an extension to June 25th, which is last Friday. So these applications are now being vetted. Essentially, it's not a a tedious process in the sense to, but it does require the child nutrition program of PSS to actually validate the person submitting the application with the school record. So we got to make sure that the actual parent is actually submitting the application. We're looking at getting the roster, a complete, all the applications verified perhaps by the early part of July. And then at the same time, we are also working with our vendor to incorporate a program into our eligibility system. So this is, of course, this is pandemic. We've never had this program before where we're providing reimbursements to children who lost meals at schools. We're looking at about 5,000 applications at this point.
Wow.
Which could consist of nearly 10,000, 11,000 children. We're looking at distributing these benefits as early as July, but that's could be unlikely. So we're looking at August to distribute these benefits. We were supposed to distribute these benefits in intervals of 3 months, consisting of, as an example, we had initially submitted a proposal to issue in June, but that was an estimate at the time we submitted the plan. That was supposed to cover for the period of August to November, as an example. This is supposed to cover the entire school year. It's a major undertaking with regards to distributing these benefits, because we're distributing NAP benefits at the same time. We're looking at 5,000 families. Actually, right at this point, 4,000 families with the regular NAP, and then we're looking at 5,000 families with just the PEBT. So we're going to have to do this in 2 events, right? So instead of doing 3 intervals of distributions, we're going to do 1 lump sum distribution for PEBT. We will also be submitting a just as an estimate, we're looking at $11 million for PEBT. We're going to submit a summer PEBT program, which would be a standard 55-day for the summer. That will account for $487 per child. Regardless whether they're in public or private, they'll just get the same amount for the summer period. But that plan has not been submitted in yet. And your other question about disaster, when it comes to disaster, it has to be a natural disaster and it has to be presidentially declared. We thought that the pandemic could be considered a disaster. Unfortunately, it's not. But we did receive funding from the Federal First Coronavirus Response Act and the CARES Act, where we increased maximum allotments to our NAP recipients, and that covered for June to August of 2020. We were fortunate to get an additional, well, in due to going back in 2018, we got $25.2 million. That has allowed us to increase the income standards. That has allowed us to equal Saipan's allotment in Guam. And so that was a disaster relief act back in 2019. In 2020, we got, fortunately, we had $14 million, which allowed us to continue these up in standards. So that's where we're at right now. We're keen to SNAP in terms of benefit levels and income standards. In 2014, we were able to have this differential allotment. So Rhoda and the Northern Islands had more benefits or higher benefits compared to Tinian higher than Saipan. So there's only 2 territories, Sea and Mine, and Alaska actually does that. But we have some plans to enhance the NAP program, considering some SNAP deductions, perhaps with alternatives or options. And when we come to that point where we're going to decide, further enhancing the NAP in FY 2022.
Thank you, Mr. Makaronis. And just my last question for you.
Sure.
In our last communication regarding the NAP program, you had mentioned that you were looking at enhancements that would include allowing people to use their NAP benefits to purchase local produce, like from the farmers markets, and that was something that had to be included, I think, in the state plan. Are there any updates since then? Because I think you were coming up on some deadline to submit that proposal, right?
Actually, with this option, you know, transition or to remain on the enhanced NAP, that's something that I would have to consider when we have confirmed information. Right now, we do have a 30% of a household's allotment geared towards purchasing local foods. So, you know, as an example, $100, 30% or $30 of their benefit is to purchase local products, local foods. So that is helping the local economy. But this is more of an incentive program for our NAP recipients. If they buy foods at the public market, as an example, there could be some sort of you know, we will give you an extra $1 so you can purchase more vegetables, as an example. So that's a plan that we would have to consider as we are working towards FY 2022.
Okay. Oh, so it hasn't been proposed yet.
It has not been proposed yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you may
Yes.
submit it for
Yeah.
2022.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, we did discuss that, and we had some kind of like bumps on the road with regards to funding, but we're fortunate to have the additional funding, which where we maintain at the higher level in terms of helping people.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that update.
Yeah.
I hope that that proposal does go through. It would be wonderful for our families that are NAP recipients and also for our local farmers on all 3 islands, right? So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question to Mr. Macaronis. Earlier you mentioned that there's increased funding to Rhode and Northern Islands. Are the income brackets the same on all 3 islands?
Yeah, so it's not increased funding in a sense, it's increased benefits. So residents on Rhoda have the highest benefit. As a matter of fact, they're probably 3rd in the nation under Hawaii, Alaska being the highest. And then Tinian comes 4th. And then Saipan and Guam comes 5th in terms of the nation. So we're in terms of high, but it's not necessarily what I meant was that the benefits are higher. It's not increased funding. I'm sorry, I missed your second question.
Well, my question was kind of more towards the income bracket.
Oh, yes, right. The income bracket is across the board.
There's no way to propose different amounts based on the cost of living
Yeah.
on these different islands?
If we are going to, well, that's one of the options that we are looking at is to bring the income standards to the SNAP level. We're now at the 100% of poverty level, but we like to increase it to 130% of poverty level, but that would still apply across all 3 islands or across the CNMI. So there won't be any deferring. Rhoda will be higher in terms of income standards. It'll be just across the board. The only flexibility we had is to give more benefits to Rhoda because the cost of food is higher there. But, you know, everybody gets paid the same.
All right, thank you. Well, I guess, so there's nothing that we can propose to have a different set of brackets for the different.
So to
the other 2
clarify,
islands.
that's going to be part of our FY. I did submit a proposal to increase the poverty level or the income standards up to the 130% poverty level, which
But
is
that's
this
throughout
is
the-
where this is the national standard.
All right, thank you for that. So we have Representative Lizama up next, and then we'll take one more, and then any questions, any additional questions can be, we can send them over to the Secretary's office. And so with that, I recognize Rep. Lizama.
Thank you, Chairman, again. This question is geared toward the DYS, Youth Center. Uh, Thank you. Cagman becomes one of the best community center. I guess we thank also the sponsorship, Rotary Club.
Mhm.
We thank TNOPEC for having Rep. Sila Bauta push hard, having other private sectors to come in, build tables and chairs and so on. How many do we have on the island? And how come there's only two places that I know? Is San Antonio already up to date? Is San Antonio was one point was a there was a youth center there?
Yes, for DYS, we're actually operating the Tanapak Youth Center.
Yes.
So as you heard earlier, we do have an expansion and rehabilitation project ongoing. For Kaimang Community Center, we completed the expansion
Thank you.
and rehabilitation. And the other youth center that we're also operating is the Rhoda Sinapolo Youth Center. All the other youth centers would fall under the Youth Affairs Office, Office of the Governor.
But wasn't it at one point that San Antonio has a youth center?
Correct, right by the church.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, the last that I heard it was condemned, but I know that the Youth Affairs Office, as most recent as about a year and a half ago, was also operating Gualarai Youth Center, the House of Manhobin. Currently, they just opened the San Vicente Youth Center and the back to normal again, the Cobbler Youth Center.
Um, Now my next question will be for the NAPSR. Um, are we still on coupons or are we trying to convert into cards? And this will probably help you instead of shutting down stores because they violate the rules, having some type of, you know, whatever you want to call it, but it's inappropriate. And instead of having the card that can detect this earlier to prevent them from, to prevent you from shutting them down, sometimes that coupon or food stamp is what gets them going with their business. So what is your plan to make sure that this does not happen? I've been getting calls from business vendors as to what can I help them? I just don't know. Can you tell me or educate me, please? Because those are it affects the economy. They're paying taxes. So please, thank you.
Yeah, it is a profitable business, right? NAP. But let's just focus on the coupons themselves and what direction are we headed there? So we've hired a consultant, a company that has 30 years of experience in EBT development, and they review proposals. They're helping us out with a scope of work, and we're planning on submitting this. We're actually the final stage of this scope of work. We're going to submit it to FNS for review, and when they approve that, we will provide this to two third-party processors or EBT processors. And so there is a process, and we don't have to go into the very detail of these processes, but we're looking at January of 2023 to actually roll over or go live in terms of EBT. So it's something's happening. Just to kind of give you that update. So. Okay.
Thank you, Rep. Lizama. We'll take one more. All right. If there are none, at this time, I'd like to thank you, Secretary, and your team. What I do hope we get from your office prior to the July 1st or on July 1st, because we are expecting a revised budget. And, you know, I hope that your department can share with the committee a detailed breakdown of your additional requests. I mean, when we see that your initial request was at 1.1 and you are being there's a proposal for 4.1, that's a 2.9 million funding level above what you've initially requested for. And sometimes we may not see what the breakdown would be when we get, if we get, or sorry, when we get the revised budget. And so if we can see what your justification is for the additional funds, that'll help the committee to see if that's, you know, something that we can continue to fund or move the money elsewhere, because 2.9 is a lot of money, and the total ARPA allotted for DCCA is 3 million. It's way above your initial ask. And so if we can, if that's something that the department can share with the committee, we'll appreciate it, and that will take those those proposal under consideration in how we move forward with the overall request. We are looking at finalizing the budget by middle part of next month, and so whatever information we have, that'll help the committee to make that determination in regards to the additional requests. Because, again, the revised budget may just show a summary, but we won't have the breakdown of those requests. And so if you can, again, if you can provide the committee with that, then we'd appreciate any inputs that you have, and we'll certainly discuss the additional requests with the rest of the members come middle part of next month. And so with that, members, if you have any additional questions for the secretary, please feel free to shoot it over to the secretary, and hopefully we get those responses by the middle part of next month. With that said, secretary, and to anyone else in your team, if there's anything else you'd like to add.
Mr. Chairman, can
that
I
would be
just
your
make a short comment?
Sure.
Just so I understand, we did share that we've been asked by OMB to submit an expenditure plan for these additional monies, which we are going to. It's kind of a rush job because we had, we just got it. Our original 2022 budget submission was submitted in accordance with OMB's directions and guidance. And then these new monies came in, and then we've been asked to submit an expenditure plan for that, and we will to OMB. And I believe if OMB is going to be submitting that in as a revised budget, then it'll go through that channel, not directly to the committee. I have a question though. Is that ARPA money subject to appropriations?
No, it's not. But the general, or the volume 1, the general fund proposal is subject to the committee's review. And so I guess the reason why I'm asking this is because when you submit these additional requests to OMB, when we get it, it won't show what the detailed breakdown is. I mean, you've listed several activities in which you are hoping to use some of these monies for, but we don't know exactly how you are planning to use this money, because it's not something that you really shared with the committee other than what some of the plans are. And so no, we don't have the authority to appropriate the ARPA money, but if you are being funded fully through ARPA, then we can use the general fund portion towards other activities, if that makes any sense.
Thank you for that clarification. And let me just say that, there's a lot going on right now. We're currently working with CDBG DR to repurpose the Cagmang Juvenile Detention Center to serve as a mass care facility. DCCA is responsible as there's this designation ESF 6 to be the mass care department responsible for mass care. And so that is going on right now. We don't know if we would need additional personnel or operational funding for that because the application is still under review. There's the 23 million for the sports and cultural tourism enhancement project that was just approved recently, an EDA grant. That's why we're trying to beef up our sports division to be able to plan for that, as well as the Pacific mini games coming up next year. So there's a lot of things going on right now. Next year is probably when Flame Tree Festival will be. We will have it this year. Unfortunately, we were not able to do it. We were, based on advice from the COVID task force. But there's a lot that we're planning for, and so right now, given this short period of time that we were asked to turn in, it will be detailed. It will, disclose how much would go towards personnel and why, and it will go also for all others, for the for the different divisions. And like I said, we'll turn it into OMB. We'll come to you, and then you guys can call us in if you want to. Again, it's just not ready now, Mr. Chairman, for us to turn in. And the one question I asked Ms. Rosario is that, is this plan flexible? It has to be for our purposes, because priorities can change, and we may have to shift some funding from one program to another, depending on the need and the priorities. So I'm glad. I understand it is flexible. What we'll be turning in to OMB would be the plan as of now. Will be our priority. But will it change? Possibly. It depends really on the need for services. And I just wanted to close with that so that the committee can, understand. It will be forthcoming, Mr. Chairman, but through OMB. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. All right, with that, members, that concludes the budget hearing for DCCA. At this time, I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda. Miscellaneous. Members? All right, if there's none, tomorrow we do have NMTI that will close out all scheduled budget hearings with the agencies. I am working on scheduling one with the independent agencies. It was scheduled for Thursday, but because we have our JGO on Thursday, we'll push it over to next week. I also got a confirmation a message from the commissioner of DPS that he is extending his medical leave for 2 weeks. So during we'll schedule another meeting to discuss next steps regarding that and how we would want to proceed. Also, members, pending the July 1st submission of any revision to the budget, Mr. Rabago will work on the new numbers, and then we will schedule a time within the next week to fully go over the over and unders on the budget allocations. And so please keep your schedule clear next week, other than JGO. And so with that, I now recognize Rep. Babauta.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of things. I'd like to see the Attorney General's office for a budget hearing, and possibly the Public Defender's office. And as to the Department of Public Safety, next step would be to ask him for a medical slip from a doctor. Otherwise, I highly recommend we put $1 in his salary on the budget. Thank you.
All right, any other under miscellaneous? Hold on. I recognize Rep. Christina Saban.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think that we need to have this candid discussion with the DPS commissioner. He's, I don't think it's unreasonable what Chairwoman Babata has asked for to request a doctor's slip. It's not helping his department that he has been thus far unavailable to participate in a budget hearing and answer the questions that we have for his department, for the needs of his department in this upcoming fiscal year, the performance of this department. If he needs reasonable accommodations, if he wants to participate, if he's able to participate in some other way, I think we can have that conversation as well. But I think it's worthwhile to note that another committee, the JGO committee, issued a subpoena, Deuces Tecum, to the commissioner, and he was at work when he was served. So if he's able to answer questions of the media, if he's able to go and show up at the office and sign documents and look into some of the questions that have been raised with him by reporters, by members of the public, by members of this body, but he can't appear for a budget hearing, I think we need to get an audience with him and have him address this body. So thank you. With that, I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. And so maybe we'll schedule another meeting to approve another 1301 to 1309. If it worked for JGO, then it may work for Ways and Means. All right. Any other members? All right. If there's none, can I get a motion for adjournment? Motion was made and seconded. Discussion. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned at 3:01 p.m.